More on all of that, I'm joined now by Sky News senior reporter Carolyn Marcus and our political reporter from Canberra, Cam Redden. Well, welcome to you both. Again, a feature in the House today, the issue of visas out of Palestine dogging Labor. The Coalition today confirming that if all the current Gazans were to stay in Australia permanently, and I suspect many will, the cost to taxpayers would be around $300 million. Well, that's a big figure, Caroline, but that's just for the first 4 years. But let's put the cost to one side. I think the focus is got to be on the lack of security checks and the attempts by the government again today to avoid answering just basic, simple questions. That's what's hurting them. And I'm pretty confident, as an example, that they took this decision without formal advice from ASIO. And that's why they keep dodging the question. And that speaks volumes to me.
Well, it's difficult to imagine any security agency advising a government that it's a good idea to take up to 3,000 people, it's up to at the moment, from a terrorist enclave where there is still majority support for Hamas, a terrorist organisation, and majority support for those horrific October 7 attacks on Israel. The most minimal of security checks appears to have been done on average 24 hours to check these people, and in some cases as little as 1 hour. How can we rest easy as a public that this is the level of security checks that the government thinks is all right when it's people who are coming from these areas? When in the past, when we had under the coalition government, people coming from Syria, from Afghanistan, escaping similar Islamist regimes, we had an average of 12 months for those sorts of security checks to be done. How can you possibly compare the two? But I have to say, Peter, I'm not quite as confident when it comes to ASIO anymore. Now that we've heard the ASIO boss, Mike Burgess, say that it's that people who express support for Hamas, that's not a deal breaker when it's in terms of giving them a visa to come here. That's quite all right, apparently. So it doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence when I hear things like that. But in terms of what happened today in Parliament, it was more of the same from the Prime Minister, not answering questions properly, flinging around personal accusations against Peter Dutton and the coalition, saying that Peter Dutton is nasty and that he's punching down. I always think if someone resorts to personal attacks like that, it means that they don't have a very good defence to the argument in the first place.
Well, we'll stay with the personal attacks because the Teals Cam, they had a press conference today. They say they're not a party, but they always front together looking very much like a party. They were accusing the coalition of misogyny. I'm going to speak to the Liberal Deputy Leader on this point in a moment. But Labor is close to introducing the Independent Parliamentary Standards Commission. I did note in the package we played just before, the person pushing this new commission, Katie Gallagher, talked about bullying and name-calling and poor treatment, but she was, of course, accused by her own colleague, the late Kimberley Kitching, of being a bully, being one of the mean girls. Well, she's got carriage of this issue. Take us through the code and what it'll mean for politicians.
Yeah, there's a big question about how this will look in practice, Peter, because the body won't be able to do a lot on its own. What it can do is make a series of recommendations for action that the Parliament can then take if somebody is found to have behaved badly, particularly for MPs. So it can say, for example, that if X MP has behaved badly, to exactly what threshold, what would meet that standard, we don't yet know for sure. But they could have things like, for example, part of their pay, they could be docked, they could be suspended from Parliament for a period of time, booted off a committee. If a staffer has acted inappropriately, they could essentially be ordered to sack that member of staff. So much of this remains a question mark until any of it is tested practically, Peter. Arguably the most important point about this whole thing, though, it doesn't cover conduct in the chamber. So all the to and fro, the rough and tumble of question time, in debates, the certain, words that might be used to describe people during the rough and tumble of political debate, that's not covered. All of this covers outside activities. So, conversations in the corridor, behaviour in offices, all of that counts. What happens in the chamber doesn't. So how much of what we see for day-to-day politics actually gets held up to this standard? That's a bit of an unknown so far.